Baruchim Abayim, welcome everyone to a special edition of All Parsha on Parshas Devarim, the Ben La'ashri, the Tzaddik of Ranana on Parshas Devarim. I want to share with you 8 amazing offerings of the Tzaddik of Ranana, the Ben La'ashri on Parshas Devarim. We know the Tzaddik of Ranana gives a haftacha that anyone who says over his Divrei Torah in his name, he will pray for you and bail you out of any tzara ba'olam hazeh uva'olam haba. So let us begin the Ben La'ashri, Parshas Devarim. Eileh ha-devarim asher diber Moshe. Rashi explains because these are words of rebuke, and Moshe Rabbeinu was enumerating all the times that they angered Hashem. Therefore, the rebuke is not listed explicitly, but rather beremez. Achad asar yomei chayrev derech har seir ad kodesh barnei vahi be'arba'im shana be'ashtei asar chodesh be'echad chodesh diber Moshe al kol Yisrael be'ever hayarden ba'midbar ba'arava mol sof bein paran uven toifel v'lavan v'chatzeros v'di zahav. These are allusions to various chatam of Klal Yisrael, Koirach, the Egel. So the Ben La'ashri wants to know, it's true in the opening, Moshe Rabbeinu's merames the sins of Klal Yisrael, but ultimately he explicitly rebukes them and mentions openly the sins of the Jewish people. So what do Chazal mean that the sins are only mentioned beremez? So the Ben La'ashri explains, based on the teaching of the Toldos Yaakov Yosef on Parsha Shemos in the name of Maharil Finster, on the pasuk Ki Gomar Chasid Ki Fasu Emunim Mibnei Adam. Ki Gomar Chasid Ki Fasu Emunim Mibnei Adam. And Maharil Fistner explains, you know why Gomar Chasid? You know why there are no tzaddikim? Because Kifasu Emunim Mibnei Adam. Because the Hamoinam, the regular folk, are missing Emunah. And because the regular folk are sinning egregiously, that they're missing Emunah, there is a pigam in the tzaddikim as well. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to rebuke all of Israel. When it comes to the tzaddikim, they only need to be rebuked for a dakos, a very small semblance of sin. When it comes to the rest of the people, they are sinning openly. Therefore, he begins by rebuking the tzaddikim beremez, in a hint, because since their sin is on a very minuscule level, it suffices for them to be rebuked beremez. But the rest of the people who are sinning openly, they are rebuked openly as well. Or, in offering number 2, the Ben La'ashri gives the following exposition. This is based on a teaching of Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei, Paragimel, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Musar Hashem B'ni Al Timas. Literally, the Musar of God, my son, do not be disgusted with. But the Mefarshim explain, it means as follows, that one who offers and gives Musar to Klal Yisrael, Hashem requests of us, B'ni Al Timas, do not make my child disgusting. Do not explicitly mention their sin. And the reason why one who offers rebuke should not mention their sin explicitly is because by doing so it arouses the mekatrig on Klal Yisrael. Because when the accuser comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, I'm not going to pay attention to you. The pasuk says, Lo yakom eid echad be'ish l'chol avon l'chol chatas. And therefore, you're only an eid echad and you're ineffective. We don't accept your testimony. But then the mekatrig, the accuser, says, but this rabbi, he also consents and has testified against the Jewish people and is mekatrig on them. So, when somebody is doiresh and he is mazkir, the chatam of Klal Yisrael, the mekatrig says, okay, I got my second witness. This is what it means. Al tashes yadcha im rasha. Don't testify together with the wicked one. The wicked one refers to the mekatrig. For you to be liyos, for you, rabbi, to be a witness as well, because by doing so, chamas, you're going to allow and empower the mekatrig to punish the Jewish people. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu acted very smartly, and he first mentioned their sin, beremez, and he was only saying names of locations. But b'machshava, he had in mind certain sins that they did, and the mekatreg. Here's a principle based on Tosfos and Shabbos Yud Beis Amud Beis. A mekatreg doesn't know the thoughts of a person, because even heavenly angels don't know what a person's thoughts are. So therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, so as to following this principle, who didn't want to be joined together with the Mekatreg and mention the sins of the Jewish people openly. Therefore, he only said it beremez, and the G'dolei Yisrael, they understood, and what they did was, they were mesakein the chet b'shoyresh, they corrected the chet in its root, and once the chet is corrected b'sharshai, then Moshe Rabbeinu could go ahead and say it explicitly, because the Midas Hadin has already been eradicated at its root, b'sharshai. As Rashi says in the beginning of Parshas Maseh, that as Klal Yisrael is traveling, it's a mashal to a father who tells his son, on the way here, you had a headache here, you didn't feel well here while we were traveling to the doctor, and but this the father only mentions on the way back, because once the doctor already brought the refuah, there's no concern to mention the illness. So too, once Klal Yisrael sort of got the message through the remez, so the din has already been sweetened, b'sharshai, there's no chashash of mentioning it explicitly. Okay, Eileh is gematria 36. 36 is life 2 times. The Ben La'ashri quotes the Maral of Prague in his Shabbos Hagadol drasha. In his, it's called Divrei Negidim for Shabbos Hagadol. He says that anything that occurs during the week is already, the light of that event is already detected in the previous Shabbos. And therefore, since Devarim is a Parsha that we read before Tisha B'Av, then all the events of Tisha B'Av are alluded to in Parshas Devarim, including Eileh. Eileh is Chai 2 times. There are 2 dimensions of life that occur on Tisha B'Av. Number 1, as the Medrash tells us, somebody was plowing their cow on Tisha B'Av, and they were told, no, let your cow stop working, take off his reins, because your temple was destroyed. And then the cow gave another krechts, and the worker was told, okay, now you could work with your cow, because Mashiach was born. In other words, on Tisha B'Av, it's the time of the Churban, it's also the time of the birth of Mashiach. These 2 lives and lifespans and dimensions of living are alluded to in the word Eileh. Eileh is Chai twice, 36. Furthermore, Eileh Hadvarim. Interestingly, Rashi tells us on the words Eileh Hadvarim Parshas Yisroi, these are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Klal Yisrael. Rashi says in Yisroi, Lo pachas, lo yoser, not less and not more. Moshe Rabbeinu did not detract a word, he didn't add a word. Okay, that's important to know regarding when Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah. But of what significance is that? Asks the Ben La'ashri in terms of the rebuke that Moshe Rabbeinu gave Klal Yisrael. And again, he brings the same concept that we've already mentioned, and this is going to be a theme that the Ben La'ashri offers 3 times in this week's offerings, and that is a moichiach, a chacham who's dorish barabim. When the Shechina is present, he should be very careful not to mention the sins of the Jewish people openly, but rather it should only be beremez. Could be, says the Ben La'ashri, this is the significance of that which the Gemara says in Brachos on Dav Vav, that the reason why the public addresses were always so crowded, the Kala, the events of public Torah dissemination were always so crowded, is from the Shedim. So ask the Ben La'ashri, what were the Shedim doing at the Shabbos Hagadol drasha? But the answer is they came because maybe the Moichiach will be Megala, the sins of the Tzibur, and they will have what to be Mekatreg on. As the Baal Shem Tov teaches us in Parshas Mishpatim on the Pasuk, Al Tashes Yadcha Imrasha Liyos Eid Chamas, that the Samach Mem comes to Mekatreg on Klal Yisrael, to be Choymes, souls from them, or Parnasa. So Hashem says, I don't accept your testimony. It says, Al Pi Shnayim Eidim Yakum Davar. You're only an Eid Echad, and therefore we're warned, Al Ti Yadcha Eid Chamas. You should not join to the Mekatreg to be another witness. Al Tashes Yadcha Im Rasha Liyos Eid Chamas. Therefore, the pasuk says, Eileh Hadvarim. Moshe only said these words, and he said it b'derech remez. to allude to the concept that when one rebukes Klal Yisrael, one should not openly say their sin, but rather only beremez, so as not to join up with the mekatreg who wants to accuse Klal Yisrael and is rendered unable to because he's only one witness. Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe al Kol Yisrael. This is offering number 5. Eila, says the Ben Lashri, and this actually comes from the Chida, stands for Avak Lashon Hara. Eila stands for Avak Lashon Hara. So, what is Avak Lashon Hara doing over here? We know there's a machlokes in Masechta Erachin on Tesvav Amud Beis. What takana is there for Bali Lashon Hara? So the first man, the Amar, holds they should learn Torah. Shenemar Marpa Lashon Eitz Chaim. Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina says, if you spoke Lashon Hara, there's no takana. Ask the Ben Lashri, how could you have such a disparate machlokes? Normally there's a concept of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim. These and these are all the word of the living God. And here we have such a machlokes mehepech lehepech. According to Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina, they have a takana by learning Torah, and according to Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina, there's no takana at all. But the answer is as follows. The Gemara in Bava Basra says on Kuf Samach Daled Amud Beis. There are 3 averos that one is not saved from daily, and the Gemara says, does everyone want Gilui Arayos, Gezela, and Lashon Hara? The Gemara says, V'kulam Rubam begezel miyutam ba'arayis v'kulam b'lashon hara. The Gemara says everyone speaks lashon hara. No, avak lashon hara. Says the Ben Lashri, since we have a principle in Avodah Zarah Daf Gimel, ein hakadosh baruch hu ba betrunya in Bri Yosef. God is not looking to bust our chops. If the Rebbeinu Shem created us in a way where everyone speaks lashon hara, then it has to be there's a takana for avak lashon hara. Lashon hara proper, real, live lashon hara. Outright Lashon Hara, not everyone violates. And Avak Lashon Hara, that's the kind of Lashon Hara that you have to say, everyone agrees has a takana. Says the Ben Lashri. Really, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees for Avak Lashon Hara, Torah is a takana, and everyone agrees for real Lashon Hara, Torah is not a takana. So we read the pasuk as follows. Eila, Avak Lashon Hara, Hadvarim asher diber Moshe al Kol Yisrael. Through learning Torah, that Moshe taught us we could be masakin it, because Avak Lashon Hara is Kol Yisrael, something that everybody violates. Okay, offering number 6. Rashi says that the sins of the Jewish people were only mentioned beremez because of the kavod of Klal Yisrael. And as we asked many times, soon Moshe Rabbeinu explicitly mentions their sin. So what does it mean that Moshe only mentioned their sin b'derech remez out of the kavod of Klal Yisrael? And again, the Ben Lashri cites the principle of the Baal Shem Tov in Parshas Mishpatim, al tashes yadcha imrash aliyos eid chamas, that somebody who is moichiach Klal Yisrael cannot mention their sins openly, because by mentioning it openly, it's ma'orer the Satan, who until then is only in Eid Echad, and the Rebbeinu Shalom says al pishnayim eidim yakum davar. So therefore, their sins can only be mentioned beremez. However, says the Ben Lashri, Moshe Rabbeinu first mentioned their sins beremez, and by doing so, they got the message and they did tshuva me'ahava. And once they did tshuva me'ahava, so then their sins can be transformed into mitzvahs. So therefore, after Moshe Rabbeinu mentioned their sin beremez, he can now mention their sin befeirosh, because all their sins turned into mitzvahs. And this is really the kavod of Klal Yisrael. This is the deeper meaning of what Rashi says. Because of the kavod of Klal Yisrael, Hashem only mentioned their sin beremez, and by mentioning it beremez, they're able to do tshuva me'ahava, and by doing tshuva me'ahava, their sins turn into mitzvahs. Hence, it is the kavod of Klal Yisrael only to mention their sin, the derech remez. Fine. Offering number 7. Achad asar yoimei chayrev, derech har seir ad kadesh barnea. 11 days from chayrev, by the road of har seir until kadesh barnea. Based on the Sefer HaYetzirah, who teaches that in the realm of Kedusha, 9 is not kadosh, only 10. 11 is not kadosh, only 10. The Sefer Yetzirah says, Eser v'loi tesha v'loi achad asar. 11 is not Kedusha. It corresponds to the 11 curses in Parshas Kisavai. The way they're rectified is through the 11 ingredients of the Ketores, that among them is Chelbana, and it is turned L'Toiva. Now, therefore the Pasuk says, Achad asar yomei chayrev. The pathway of transforming 11 into Kedusha is a very difficult path. It's Derech Har Seir. It's the path of the Galos, the challenges, the Shmados, the Shchitos of the Galos. It is a difficult path. The only way to do it is Derech Har Seir. However, at the end of the day, Hashem promises us that we will survive that path, because it's Yom Achad Asar, the number 11, can only be transformed Derech Har Seir, but ultimately we will achieve the Yom, the Geula. And perhaps, says the Ben La'ashri, this is a remez, Ad Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea is Gematria 726, the year 1966. Says the Ben La'ashri, Kadesh Barnea 1966 is a remez to the coming of Mashiach in that year. And although we know we were not Zoicha to Mashiach in that year, nevertheless we were Zoicha to great Nisim, Benaflois for Klal Yisrael, Be'eretz Yisrael. And then finally, the final offering, Vayehi ba'arba'im shana, and it was in the 40th year. We know the word Vayehi, ein Vayehi ala lashon tsar. What is the tsar over here? Why does it say Vayehi? The Sifsei Koyin says, the tsar over here is the Petira of Moshe Rabbeinu. That when Moshe Rabbeinu died, the Gemara says that in the Schus of Miriam came the Be'er, and the Schus of Aaron came the Ananei HaKavod. And through Moshe, we got all three matanos. We got back the Be'er, we got back the Ananei HaKavod, and we had the Mana as well. And now, Vayihi ba'arba'im shana, the Ein Vayihi ala lashon sar, we lost all these matanos, toivos, says the Ben La'ashri. These three words, Vayihi ba'arba'im shana, Im HaKoilel is Gematria, Shai, the great gift of Be'er, the well, Man, the food min hashamayim, and Av HaKavod, the cloud of glory. May we be zoicha to get all these matanos back, and all the matanos of the Beis Hamikdash, and the return of the Shechina, that it should return to us. B'mhera v'yameinu, wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos, and a meaningful and easy Tainus Haba Aleinu L'Taiva.